They left me $20,000 in an old truck. But the dog? He got $2.5 million. Hi, I'm Lauren. I was the daughter who managed the medications, folded the laundry, and sat beside my dad when no one else did. And yet, at the inheritance meeting, I found out he'd left almost everything. Not to me, but to my sister's poodle, Charlie. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. But I knew something was wrong. And when I opened his old flip phone, I found the voicemail that changed everything. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. They always said I was the dependable one. They never said I mattered. Birthdays, holidays, even Sunday mornings. It was always me setting the table while Sophie slept in with her dog. That's not bitterness talking. It's just observation. Some daughters were made for the spotlight. I was made for background music. Pleasant. Forgettable. It was early fall in Westport, Connecticut. The kind of day where the trees look like postcards, burnt orange and maple red, and the air smells like dry leaves and expensive cologne. I had a list in my pocket and a schedule in my head. Pick up Dad's meds, stop by the dry cleaner, grab that cranberry goat cheese from the market that Mom insisted made the salad pop. When I pulled into the driveway, Diane, my mother, was already inside prepping the dining table like she was hosting a UN delegation instead of dinner for 4. The centerpiece had real eucalyptus stems and ribbon-tied silverware, and she was halfway through chilling the wine. "You're late," she said, not even glancing up. "I'm early," I replied, setting the dry cleaning bag over a chair. "Dinner's not for another 2 hours." She waved a hand. "The Pinot needs to breathe." Sophie was on the couch in yoga pants and a cashmere wrap, scrolling Instagram while Charlie, her miniature poodle, snored beside her. "Oh, hey," she said, eyes never leaving her phone. "Did you bring Dad's prescription?" I nodded. "Got everything on the list." "Cool," she muttered, tapping out a reply to someone named @Brandon.bakes. The rest of the afternoon played out like a loop I'd lived 100 times. I helped Mom plate the appetizers. Not too much brie, it overpowers the figs. Set the table, fluffed the cushions. Sophie painted her nails. Charlie barked at nothing. At dinner, we sat beneath the soft glow of a chandelier too fancy for a Tuesday. Dad, looking tired and thinner than usual, offered a quiet toast. "To my girls," he said, "and Lauren, for always holding this family together." I smiled, half grateful, half aware it was the kind of praise that came only when the work was invisible. Diane cut in before I could reply. "Did you see Sophie's last post? 120,000 views in under a day. Brands are reaching out already." "That's great," I murmured, slicing into my filet. Charlie jumped up and barked during grace, and Mom laughed like he'd recited the Lord's Prayer. "He's just excited. It's filet night," she said, feeding him a piece under the table. After dinner, I offered to do the dishes. Mom didn't say no. She never did. She just let me move around the kitchen like I lived there, like I was part of the furniture. Sophie disappeared upstairs. Dad patted my shoulder on his way out. "Thank you," he said softly. "You always make it easier." That should have warmed me. Instead, it stung. Back at my apartment, I did what I always did. Folded laundry, watered the snake plant that was somehow still alive, and set an alarm for 6 a.m. My phone buzzed just before midnight. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Sophie. It was Mr. and Mrs. Klein, our next-door neighbors. "Lauren?" Mrs. Klein's voice was shaky. "I think you should come. Your dad—" He collapsed in the hallway. I didn't grab a coat, just my keys and my purse. The drive back was a blur of wet pavement and headlights. As I turned onto the familiar street, red and blue lights pulsed through the trees. I hit the brakes too hard. The front door was open. Dad left the world quietly. The storm came after. Every time I made a choice for the family, I told myself they'd remember. I thought showing up, being dependable, would mean something. I never thought I'd be so easily forgotten. It was a rainy Thursday when we gathered in the lawyer's office downtown, the kind of rain that soaks your socks even if your shoes are waterproof. Westport always looked too polished to feel real, but today it wore the gray like truth. Diane sat next to me, legs crossed neatly, a Burberry scarf draped over her shoulders like a medal. Sophie scrolled through her phone, thumbs flying, while Charlie, the heir apparent, curled up inside a monogrammed carrier at her feet, chewing a plush toy shaped like a champagne bottle. Mr. Rice was an older man with the kind of face that never changed expression. Calm, controlled. He clasped his hands as if prayer might soften what he was about to read. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "As George requested, I'll proceed with the will." I waited, trying not to wring my hands. A letter, maybe, or some acknowledgement. I didn't need much, just something that said, "I saw you." "Lauren Matthews," he said, reading from the papers, "is to receive a disbursement of $20,000 in ownership of her father's 1998 Ford pickup truck." My mouth went dry. I heard Diane exhale, like that part was done. Sophie looked up for the first time. She didn't smile, just blinked. To Diane Matthews, the estate property in full, along with all liquid cash assets not otherwise designated. Not a single twitch from her face. No grief, just the quiet confidence of someone collecting what was always expected. And finally, the remaining $2.5 million in investment holdings are to be placed in a pet trust designated for Charlie Matthews, with Sophie Matthews named as caretaker and trustee. Charlie barked as if on cue. The room spun. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Sophie snorted. "Oh my God, are you serious? Is this legal?" Diane reached down to adjust the strap on Charlie's carrier. "George loved that dog," she said softly. "You know that." I blinked at Mr. Rice. Did my dad actually write this? He hesitated just a beat too long. It was signed and notarized 3 weeks before his passing. Sophie laughed, short and sharp. "Wow, Charlie really is the favorite." And that's when I lost it. Did he love him more than his daughter? I didn't mean to say it aloud, but my voice broke right through the varnish of the room. No one answered. Not really. Diane crossed her arms. "Your father made his wishes clear. You should respect them." "Respect?" Mr. Rice cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin, cream-colored envelope. "He left this for you," he said, sliding it toward me. I stared at it. My name written in Dad's handwriting, looping and shaky. I didn't pick it up right away. For a moment, all I could hear was the rain, and Charlie's soft choo-choo on his champagne toy. Then I reached for it, slowly, carefully, like it might still mean something. "Must be instructions for the truck," Sophie said, stretching like it was the end of yoga, or maybe a mixtape. "Enough," I said quietly. My fingers trembled, but I didn't open the letter. Not yet. I needed air and silence, neither of which existed in that room. I stood up. "I'll read it at home." Diane rolled her eyes. "You're always so dramatic." "No," I said. "I've just always been quiet. You assumed that meant I agreed." Mr. Rice watched me carefully, almost sympathetically. Maybe he saw something the others didn't. As I walked toward the door, I passed Charlie's carrier. He looked up at me with wide black eyes. I wasn't sure if I hated him or hated how much they loved him. Outside, the rain hit harder. I didn't run. Let it soak me. Let the sky say what I wouldn't. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, watching the envelope on my lap. Even sealed, it said more than they ever had. It wasn't a letter. It was a release form for grief. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for a full day before I opened it. I'd moved it 3 times, once off the mail pile, once beside the fridge, and finally next to the sink, where I couldn't avoid it without knocking it over. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that made even the hum of the refrigerator feel intrusive. Laundry was folded but not put away. A half glass of wine had turned sour on the coffee table. The only color in the room was a faded photo of me and Dad taped to the fridge. Me in a high school band uniform, him in a hospital gown, both of us smiling too wide. I opened the letter standing up. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I could outpace the hurt. Lauren, it read, take care of yourself. You always did more than anyone asked, and more than anyone noticed. I sat down. The tears didn't come right away. It was a different kind of sadness. Not sharp, just heavy, like walking through water. There wasn't anything else in the letter. No mention of the will, no explanations, just that sentence. You always did more than anyone noticed. That was it. I kept reading it over, waiting for something else to appear, a hidden meaning, a postscript, anything that could explain why my father, my soft-spoken, methodical father, would leave a fortune to a dog and a truck to the daughter who drove him to every appointment, every checkup, every quiet Sunday walk when his knees couldn't handle the park trail anymore. I thought of when I was 9. Mom missed my birthday cake because she was at the spa with Sophie and the dog. She called an hour later to say she lost track of time. I told myself it didn't hurt. That lie got easier over time. The lie that I didn't need the same thing Sophie did. That being responsible meant being overlooked. I called Jennifer. She picked up on the first ring. You read it? She asked. I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Yeah. She didn't rush me. That's what I loved about her. She let silence breathe. It felt unfinished, I finally said. Maybe he didn't get to finish, she said, or maybe he wasn't allowed to. I paused. What do you mean? I mean, she exhaled, people do things when they're scared or when someone pushes them. You said the new will was dated 3 weeks before he passed? Yes. Was he doing okay then? Lucid? I thought back. His hands had started trembling more. His voice, too. He tired easily. I'd chalked it up to the meds, or age. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. Jennifer went quiet again. Then gently, Lauren, is it possible your mom could have influenced the document? I didn't answer. But the silence between us agreed louder than words. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. I searched my inbox for the last email Dad ever sent me. It was 2 days before the new will was supposedly signed. Hi, sweetheart. Tell Diane I'll call tomorrow. Don't want her to worry. Love you. It was polite, brief, not like him. No mention of me, no warmth, just coordination, like I was the assistant between 2 departments. I clicked the will attachment. I don't know what I was looking for, but then I right-clicked, opened properties, and there it was, last edited by D. Matthews. I froze. I stared at the screen like it might correct itself, like it might say, George Matthews, like it might blink and whisper, just kidding, but it didn't. I checked again. The timestamp was 3 days before he passed, a Sunday. I remembered that day. I'd brought him soup and we watched Jeopardy reruns in silence. He was too tired to even hold a spoon. There was no way he typed a new will. There was no way he left that money to a dog and meant it. I looked at the photo again. Me and Dad. His eyes crinkled just slightly when he smiled, like he wanted to laugh but held back. He always did that when Mom was nearby. Said she liked things tidy. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. I closed the laptop. My heart beat slow, purposeful. They changed it, I whispered, then louder. She changed it. I walked into my childhood home and realized even the dog had more legacy than I did. The brunch invitation was printed on thick cardstock, gold-trimmed, sealed in an envelope with a paw-shaped wax stamp. Join us in celebrating Charlie Matthews and his new chapter, it read. It was real. That wasn't the part that stung most. What stung was that Mom called it a family gathering. It was early spring and the daffodils Dad planted years ago were blooming without him. I parked at the end of the driveway like a guest, not a daughter. Inside, the house looked like a showroom. White hydrangeas spilled from silver vases. A custom cake sat at the center of the table. 3 tiers, blue icing, and a fondant Charlie perched proudly on top, wearing a golden crown. There were name cards at every place setting, except mine. Diane saw me first. "Lauren, how thoughtful of you to come," she said, like I'd crashed a gala she barely remembered inviting me to. I nodded once. "I'm just here for some of Dad's books." Sophie was by the mimosa bar, laughing with a couple in matching designer sunglasses. "It's Charlie's trust brunch," she announced like a pageant queen. Charlie barked in response, dressed in a satin tuxedo, his nails painted gold. I moved through the house like a ghost. The living room still smelled like Dad's cologne in corners no one vacuumed properly. Everything else, flowers, finger food, fake smiles, belonged to someone else now. I passed by the staircase heading toward the garage when I heard it. "He trusted me to handle it," Diane said. Her voice was low but clipped. The will was a formality. I knew what he wanted. Sophie chuckled. "Well, you did great, Mom. Charlie's living better than most retirees." I stood still, my hand resting on the banister. My stomach twisted. Not with shock, but with recognition. This wasn't about betrayal. It was about permission. They never saw me as someone they had to include. I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I kept walking. In the garage, there was a plastic bin labeled George Misk. It contained his weathered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, crossword books half-filled in pen, a stack of receipts from hardware stores, and his old flip phone, the one he swore he'd never replace. I brought it all home. That night, after the buzz of mimosas and fondant cake had faded into my memory like a sitcom laugh track, I charged the phone. There was one unsent voicemail draft. "Lauren," Dad's voice crackled, frail but firm. "I need to speak with you privately. There's something off. The message cut out. I sat on my couch, the phone still in my palm. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. The silence around me was colder than it had ever been. Then I remembered the USB, the one I found taped beneath the top drawer of his desk. It had 3 files. willoriginal.pdf, willfinal.docx, and a folder labeled private. I opened the first. Dated 6 months before his death, it divided his assets equally. Me, Diane, Sophie. It included a handwritten note in the margins. "Lauren gets the lake photo. She always loved it." The second file, willfinal.docs, was similar in structure, same fonts, same formatting, but it read like a void. My name was gone. There was no lake photo. The file's metadata said it had been last edited by D. Matthews, 3 days before he died. The same Sunday I spoon-fed him soup. He could barely stay awake. There was no way he opened a Word doc that week. I clicked into the private folder. Inside was a screenshot of a text chain, him and Mr. Rice. In it, Dad had written, "Let's delay final signing. I'd like Lauren to review it." Dated 4 days before he passed. He never got that delay. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "You still okay?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "Found 2 wills. One altered post-signature. Guess who edited it?" She replied instantly, "If that document was altered post-signature, you can challenge it." I sat still, not angry, not scared, just resolved. Dad once told me, "Real power isn't loud, it's buried in paper." Turns out he was right. The truth didn't bark. It clicked open on a flash drive. The Legal Records Center smelled like dust and old toner. I sat at a monitor with Jennifer beside me, our elbows nearly touching, both of us staring at the files I'd copied from Dad's USB. She handed me a coffee without asking how I took it. At this point, she knew. "You're the only one who reads between the lines," Dad once told me. He had no idea how much I'd have to. We couldn't access the locked folders on my laptop, so Jennifer suggested calling Alex, an old friend from undergrad who went on to law school and now worked as a clerk downtown. Smart, fast-talking, with a gift for digital forensics and sarcasm. Alex arrived wearing mismatched socks and a backpack covered in legal stickers. "You said tampered, Will?" he asked, already plugging in his own keyboard. That's my favorite flavor of corruption. He was kidding, mostly. Within minutes, he cracked the encrypted folder and pulled up 2 files. One was a clean PDF, Dad's will, 6 months before his death, names evenly spaced, Lauren, Diane, Sophie. No mention of Charlie. The second was a Word doc, last saved under D. Matthews, with my name removed, and a new section added, $2.5 million held in trust for Charlie Matthews. "There's no way he wrote this," I muttered. Alex shrugged. "Metadata doesn't lie. Someone made it look like he approved this version, but every internal tag says otherwise." I leaned forward. "Can we prove it was edited after he signed?" Alex nodded. "Yes, and we can prove who did it. All these timestamps are post-signature." A flashback played in my mind. Dad sitting in his recliner, Diane circling him like a realtor staging a home. "We should add something about Charlie," she'd said. "He's part of this family." Dad had looked unsure. "A room in the will? That seems excessive." She kissed his forehead. "He deserves it." Back in the present, I opened a new document. "What are you doing?" Jennifer asked. "I'm building a timeline," I said. "Emails, voicemails, will versions, edits, everything." 3 hours later, we sat at a cafe near the courthouse. My laptop hummed beside us, filled with dates and evidence. Jennifer had highlighted the inconsistencies. Alex had formatted the files for legal submission. I added the last line. The signature was never rescinded, but the will was rewritten. Without consent, without witness, without me. Jennifer looked at me carefully. "You really want to go through with this?" "I'm not after the money," I said. "I just want to be acknowledged. I want the truth to exist in the record, even if it never mattered in the living room." She nodded. "Then we do this." Later that night, I knocked on the door of my mother's house. Diane opened it in silk. Sophie peeked from behind a wine glass. "What now?" Diane asked, voice clipped. I didn't wait for pleasantries. "You doctored it," I said. "You stole my father's last words." Diane blinked. "Excuse me? You deleted me. From his estate. From his memory. But not from the record." Sophie stepped forward, jaw tightening. "This is ridiculous. I have the file, Sophie. I have the logs. I have a message from Dad that he never got to send. I have metadata, timestamps, emails, intent." I looked straight at Diane. "And now I have a court date." Diane's eyes narrowed. "You're trying to destroy what little peace we had." "No," I said. "You already did that. I'm just refusing to let you bury the proof under brunch." I stepped back from the door. "You may have edited the document, but you can't rewrite the truth." As I walked away, the porch lights behind me flicked off. My phone buzzed. Jennifer again. Filed. Court date set. "You good?" I typed back, "For the first time, yeah." I stood there on the sidewalk beneath a pale street lamp and realized something simple and stunning. For once, someone was listening, and this time, it wasn't the dog. The day I walked into probate court, I wasn't looking for justice. I was reclaiming silence. It was late spring in Westport. The air had just started to hold warmth without threat. I wore a navy dress Dad once said made me look like someone who knew what they were doing. It felt like armor. The courtroom was small, more form than drama. No gallery, no theatrics, just benches, a tired judge in muted robes, and the quiet breath of paper being shuffled. Jennifer sat beside me, fingers tapping her knee like a metronome of support. Across the aisle, Diane looked polished as ever, her blazer perfectly creased. Sophie, in contrast, looked as if she hadn't slept. Her heels were expensive, but her eyes betrayed the cost. The judge's voice was even and impersonal. We are here to assess the validity of the estate documents regarding Mr. George Matthews. I handed over my packet, metadata reports, the voicemail from Dad, both versions of the will. Jennifer had organized everything like a story. What was? What was altered? And what was almost buried? The judge read in silence, her eyes moving slowly from one column of text to another. When she finally spoke, her tone was clipped but decisive. This court finds sufficient grounds to freeze the estate and suspend the amended will pending further review. The original 2022 document will be restored in probate until such time. A pause. Then, the revised document submitted under file name willfinal.x shows signs of material alteration and was last modified by a party not listed as its testator. Sophie's breath caught audibly. Diane didn't move, just stared ahead as if she'd rehearsed stillness. The session closed without applause or gasps, just chairs scraping softly on wood and papers being tucked away. Outside, under a tree just starting to green, Jennifer turned to me. "You did it." I shook my head. "I didn't do it to win." "Then why?" "I don't want the money," I said. "I want his truck, his books, maybe the lake photo if no one minds." Jennifer blinked, then smiled gently. "That sounds like him." "I think it is." We stood in silence, watching as Diane and Sophie exited separately. Sophie's pace was hurried, heels clacking unevenly. Diane met my gaze once, no fury, no apology, just one last attempt to withhold even the dignity of acknowledgement. It didn't land. Weeks passed. I moved into a small apartment above a used bookstore downtown. The floors creaked. The walls held stories. The truck sputtered awake on chilly mornings, stubborn as ever. His books lined my shelves. The lake photo hung above my bed. Sometimes I sat with a cup of coffee by the window and listened to the conversations below. Strangers picking out novels, debating titles, laughing over paperbacks. Life was full here, not loud, but full. Then the envelope arrived. My grandmother had passed. It wasn't unexpected. What surprised me was the invitation, sent formally, no note. The service was simple. Early summer sun filtered through the chapel windows. Bees hovered over the flower wreaths. I wore black, sat near the back. Sophie was there, alone. She stood by the casket without speaking. Her hands were clasped, her posture less sure than I remembered. She looked over once, just once, and met my eyes. I nodded. She nodded back. That was all. Maybe that's all it would ever be, and maybe that was okay. As I walked home under a sky breaking open into soft gold, I thought again about Dad's letter. Take care of yourself. It wasn't advice. It was permission. And this time, I finally heard him. Sometimes, the quietest victories leave the deepest peace. I didn't walk out of court with riches, but I walked out lighter. There are moments in life when the truth doesn't shout. It simply waits for someone to listen. And in families, what matters most isn't the inheritance we leave, but the love we choose to carry forward. If we can see one another before it's too late, maybe we won't have to fight just to be remembered. If this story reminded you of someone you once stood up for or stood up to, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share your reflections in the comments. Your voice matters too.